What's up, guys? This is Hammer here again, back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking about sort of a strange phenomenon that I have been noticing in the past couple of days. I would say past couple of months, actually. And what I am talking about is this growing number, right? And I personally believe that you've always had like parts, if not regiments, of the African American community who felt this way, but I've never seen it get to this point. What I'm referring to is that I've been seeing this sort of growing number of Black Americans, whether it's in person or in these media spaces, essentially, one, attacking, the Black diaspora or attacking Black immigrants, but two, most importantly, saying that they are not African. Now, what shocked me about it is that when I first heard Black Americans say so long, I thought, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding what they're saying, right? Maybe they're saying that, oh, we don't have citizenship to an African country, or, we're not immigrants from Africa. But no, what they're saying is that they're not African descent. But then they'll say, oh, we're not African descent, but we're Egyptians. We're North Africans. We're Native American. In fact, to make it even worse, a couple of days ago when I was, scrolling the Twitter, I came across a post that Tariq Nasheed recently put it on his Twitter page, right? And on his post, he said that there were, I think, like 19 white men who said that, there were Black people here and before the slaves came. In other words, what Tariq was trying to imply was that Black Americans are not really African descent, that they're descendants from Native Americans, right? And of course, people in the chat, lit his ass up. He got flamed. Right, but it wasn't just that. I kept scrolling to Twitter, scrolling to line. I see more, videos or tweets of Black Americans saying that they are Native, they're Cherokee, they're the Olmecs, they're everything but sub-Saharan Africa, right? Now, I do understand that. Look, there are some Black Americans who are mixed, right? But that's not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is they're just outright saying we're not African descent, right? And so I had to ask myself this question. Number one, why is this happening? Where is it coming from, right? And have I been kind of blind to it up until this time, right? Personally, I believe that there has always been a part of the Black American African community who's always felt this way, like always felt a certain way about being African descent, right? But I feel like in recent time, it's just become much more like there's just more of them now. And what's crazy is that just a couple, I think, if not weeks ago, I made a video about the whole FBA movement and how the obsession over reparations, right? Look, I have no problem with Black Americans getting reparations. The issue I have with the FBA is that it went from getting reparations just attacking Black immigrants. And so when I look at all this, I was okay, what am I missing here, right? But something I have noticed is that when you listen to many of these Black Americans online who are either saying they're not African descent, they're saying they're not African descent at all, right? They're even saying that the Atlantic slave trade didn't happen. This is what they're saying online. Right? They're saying they're not African descent. They're saying the Atlantic slave trade didn't happen, right? They're saying that they're Egyptian, North African, Morocco, Moors, Olmecs, everything but Black sub-Saharan Africa, right? So they're saying. What I had to ask myself is, okay, number one, what could be the motivation that will cause a Black American to say this type of things, right? And I had two conclusions, right? One, when I would hear many of them articulate the points, right? And of course, you had non-Black people who come in the chat and flame them, right? One thing that was very common was this whole thing about we were sold, right? We were sold and they didn't, Africans didn't send ships to come save us. So one aspect that I kept hearing is that a lot of Black Americans have a lot of resentment about the fact that they have immense amount of resentment towards Black Africans, specifically Black West Africans, because from their point of view, they were sold as slaves, some were captured, but we gotta be honest, there were many that were sold. We gotta be honest about that. Now you guys already know my background. I've said it multiple times. My family comes from the country of Cameroon. Okay, I was born in Yaoundé. I was here, I will say, since I was a kid. So I am West African, right? Like literally West African immigrant. So I cannot deny that history, right? I think a lot of West Africans don't want to be honest with it. Yes, there was some who were captured, but there was some who were sold. Now, that was a mistake, and I think we definitely got to apologize for that, but we can't deny that fact. But going back to the topic, I believe that a lot of Black Americans have resentment towards Black Africans, Black West Africans, because of that, right? I will say rightfully so, right? And personally, they blame Black Africans for everything they've gone through in this country. Because from their point of view, and I sort of understand it, right? The only reason why they ended up here as slaves, went through slavery, went through Jim Crow, or in this permanent underclass group, is because, from their point of view, we were sold as slaves. And plus, as many Black Americans have said online, these same, Black West Africans who sold us didn't come to get us back, right? And so there is a resentment here. But my whole thing is this. I have no problem in that. But just say that, right? Look, if the issue is that you feel like West Africans, specifically Black Africans, have not done enough to acknowledge that history or make amends, just like let's have that conversation. Let's see how we can move forward, right? I have no problem talking about these things. I mean, we've had many West African states who've come out, making apologies, and I will say maybe they need to go further. I agree with you on that, right? So my thing is, if this is the root cause of you guys all of a sudden saying you're not African descent, all of a sudden attacking Black immigrants, just come out and say that so we can work on that issue. But don't hide that. Don't essentially go around calling folks tethers, right? That's a tether. Calling folks tethers, attacking Black immigrants, attacking all these Black diasporans, talking about the shithole countries. Don't go around doing that, but then at the same time, not acknowledging that it's really because you feel a certain kind of way about slavery and how you got brought here, because now you're being disingenuous, right? So in my opinion, that's the first part, is that a lot of Black Americans who are now all of a sudden saying they're not African descent, they don't want anything to do with Africa, right? Part of it is that there is a pain there, a real pain, and I completely sympathize with that, right? And I believe that we can work. We should work with that. West African, that should be acknowledged, but talk about it, right? Bring those grievances, but don't just come out attacking folks, right? Because you're not strong, or you don't want to be forward about your feelings. That's what I don't like, right? So that's the first part. Okay, and by the way, that's also the reason why there's always this pushback about Black Americans reconnecting to the motherland, because from their point of view, it's like, why would I reconnect to people who've sold me? So I understand the pain, but once again, just say that, right? Let's work on that. Don't just gaslight saying it's about what the tethers are doing, right? Come on, right? But that's the first part. The second part, in my opinion, is because of how Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, right, to be clear, is viewed globally. Now, guys, if you look at the image on your screen right now, what is the first thing that comes to your mind, right? I believe that most of you guys will say, well, the first thing that comes to my mind is Africa. And you're right. This is a picture of an African hut village, right? Now, let me ask another question. If I were to go around the world and ask random people to think of Africa, right, what would come to their mind? Most people would think of sub-Saharan Africa, and they would think of Black Africans and, running around the jungle throwing spears. Let's keep it real. That's what the average person thinks around the world, right? Well, I believe that in addition to the resentment in regards to slavery and how Black Americans were sold as slaves, another reason why you're seeing this growing number of Black Americans, who are saying they're not Africa or don't want to be sold Africa, because let's be honest here, sub-Saharan Africa, I guess you say Black Africa, is at the bottom of the hierarchy. And just for those who are wondering, the reason why I say sub-Saharan Africa is because a lot of Black Africans don't want to admit this, but sub-Saharan Africa in many ways, it's not just a geographical marker. It is used as a racial demarcation line. When people say sub-Saharan Africa, what they're saying is that's where the blacks live. That's what they mean when they say, that's what they mean when they say sub-Saharan Africa. That's where the black Africans live. The blacks live. That's why sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa are typically separated from each other, right? People don't view it the same way. And because sub-Saharan Africa is a majority of the African continent, when most people think of Africa, they think of sub-Saharan Africa, right? So keep that in mind. But going back to what I was saying, because sub-Saharan Africa is at the bottom of the hierarchy globally, right? If you were a black American, I can understand how you may not want to be associated with that, right? Because one, and look, just to be fair, I will say the black diaspora does sense to have, the black diasporas do tend to have a sense of, shame in regards to the, black African heritage, right? But I think the reason why this issue gets exacerbated when it comes to black America is because, if you're a black person living in Europe, if you're a black person living in, the Caribbean, living in South America, right? Although you may have being a much more developed country, right? Your standard of living is not that vastly different compared to a black sub-Saharan Africa. It's not that vastly different. So it's much more harder for you to kind of look down on those people, right? So although you may feel a little ashamed in regards to that lineage, right? You can't really fully look down those people, and you're going to be much more willing to relate with them or kind of come to terms with that lineage. But when it comes to the average black American, because they live in the empire, they live in the superpower of the globe, right? Not only do they have let's be honest, even though black Americans are at the bottom of the hierarchy here in America, right? Based on the mere fact that they live in the United States, they have a higher standard of living than almost the entire black diaspora combined. So, number one, when they look at sub-Saharan Africans, the standard of living is way higher, right? And then number two, white Americans go out of the way to throw Africa in their face. I'm going to give you guys a perfect example, right? Whenever black Americans talk about grievances in America or talk about slavery or Jim Crow or reparations, for example, the first thing you will hear a white American say is, well, you know what? You should be happy that you're in America. You should be happy that you went through slavery and Jim Crow because you'll be in sub-Saharan Africa in the jungle eating flies. Right? That's the first they hear, right? That every time they bring up a grievance against white Americans, every time they talk about slavery and Jim Crow, even now, right, when black Americans are fighting for reparations, right, what is the number one thing you hear, right? Number one, those are my ancestors, right? So as a white person, I shouldn't be punished for my ancestors, right? That's the first thing. But the second one says, well, y'all just breeding up the white man's heir. Y'all should be glad that y'all were slaves in America because otherwise you'll be somewhere in the forest in Africa. So right, let's be honest here. That's what they hear. So all that does is just further makes them feel, more ashamed about that history and lineage, right? Now, I do agree, right? It's not everyone. You do have your Dr. Umars, you do have, black Americans who are Pan-Africans who want to say, look, you can't run from your lineage. That's not a winning strategy, right? And they do talk about building with a diaspora and go straight in the motherland. So those folks, I very much am with and support them. What I am talking about is this growing number. I believe they've always been there, but for some reason, it's an epidemic. It's just a growing number now of black Americans who are, claiming to be everything but African descent. They're Native Americans, they're Olmecs, they're Moors, they're Egyptians, they're Chinese, they're everything but black sub-Saharan African descent. They're anything but that, right? And now it's gotten so bad that you got your Yvette Cornell making live streams talking about we're not African. Those people didn't come and bring us back to Africa. They just sold us here. There's no African show. Yvette, sister, look. It's obvious that you feel pain. Look, if you feel resentment about, you being so. That's fine. Talk. Let's have that conversation. Let's try and make amends. But when you're on these live streams talking about, you feel resentment, so now all of a sudden you everything but Africa, it's sad. And now Tariq is doing the same too. Now they're Native Americans all of a sudden. So but see, that's where it comes from. And I believe those are the two reasons why. One, the first reason is the resentment about how Black Americans, I think they blame Black Africans for the situation. Right? If it wasn't for us being sold as slaves, we wouldn't have to go through all this trauma, which I get, I sympathize with, right? Then the second part is, whenever they bring up grievances towards white Americans always throw Africa in the phrase, right? Talking about, if y'all should be happy y'all were slaves, and because if it wasn't for the white man enslaving you, you would be in the jungle somewhere in Africa. So So that's where it comes from, right? But and before I even close the video, to kind of add another thing to the video, right? This, in my opinion, is also the reason why I hate any conversation around Egypt. Any conversation around Egypt by Black Americans, I just walk away from. And the reason is because it became clear to me, right? And you know what? I'm gonna give you guys a great example, right? If you look for the past couple of months, right, you had the situation with Cleopatra, right? You had the Netflix documentary that was largely pushed by Black Americans trying to claim that Cleopatra was Black. Now, for those of you that know, Cleopatra is a Macedonian Greek. She descends from the Ptolemaic dynasty, and she was a queen of Egypt, right? But the lengths at which Black Americans were trying to claim this woman as Black was insane to me, right? And it got to a point in which you had some Black, I'm going to give an example, Sergeant Willie P, shout out to the brother, I support the brother, but I remember Sergeant Willie P was talking about, why aren't these Black Africans fighting to claim ancient Egypt? Brother, the reason why Black Africans don't obsess over Egypt is because we understand that the only reason why Black Americans care so much about Egypt because you guys are trying to find every fucking possible way to not be connected with Black Africans. That's all it is. You don't want to be West African descent. You don't want to be tied to that history. And so y'all want to find every possible way to claim anything that's not Black. That's why we don't serve Egypt. We know what it's really about. Because we don't see you guys have the same energy towards the Mali Empire, the Songhai. We don't see that same energy. So we know what it is, right? So the first thing was them trying to claim Cleopatra. Now, all of a sudden, I'm hearing news that they're now going to try and make another movie with Denzel Washington with him playing Hannibal. And I'm like, what? Now, for those who don't know, Hannibal was a Carthaginian general, right? He led the force of Carthage against Rome during the Second Punic War. Now, although Hannibal lost that war, he's still revered as a great military general throughout history, right? Now, to add more facts here, Carthage is in now what is currently known as Tunisia. Yes, the same country that was whooping the hell out of Black African migrants, saying that we're not African, we are Arab. So keep that in mind. But I'm like, okay, so first you guys are making movies claiming that Cleopatra is Black. Now you're making movies trying to claim Hannibal is Black too. See, the pattern here is clear. Right? Whether it's this, over resentment over West Africans and the slave situation, whether it's them claiming that they're Native Americans or Cherokee or Olmecs, or whether it's an over obsession with everything North Africa. But once again, they never tell about South Africa. It's always North Africa, whether it's Egypt or Morocco or Tunisia, and all the North African stuff. All this comes down to is that whenever non-Black people say that a lot of Black Americans just... See, I'm going to give you an example. Before this entire situation, this epidemic of Black Americans saying, we're not African, those are tethers. But even before this epidemic, there was always this growing number of there was always non-Black people that was saying that Black Americans are ashamed of their lineage, right? And I used to kind of say that's not true, but I'm gonna keep it with you. Like, after what I've been seeing, I'm starting to believe that the Cleopatra shit, The Hannibal shit, right? Now we got the whole tether stuff. Now we got to talking about their neighbor. It's getting clear to me. Now, I understand that this does not represent a majority of Black Americans. I will say the majority of the average Black American, I would say the majority of the average Black American is neutral, right? They do have a sense of resentment towards the history, but they also acknowledge their Black African descent. But this new epidemic I'm seeing is concerning to me. But all this does is reinforce many of the criticisms that folks have had, right? The only reason many of you guys obsess over ancient Egypt, the only reason you're obsessed over Morocco or the Moors or Tunisia, the only reason you're obsessed over Native Americans, the Olmecs, all these things really come down to one fundamental conclusion, right? You do not want to be associated with West Africa. You don't want to be associated with Black Africans. That's what it is, right? And the moment in which, and when all of your attempts to essentially, I guess, not when all of the attempts that you guys had, right, to essentially erase your African identity failed, y'all just came out and said, yeah, we are not y'all. Right? And by the way, I'm not talking about, I'm speaking about a very specific portion of the Black American community, right, who've been saying this. But the problem I have with this is that they're doing this stuff now, but then they'll be surprised when decades later you'll have all these, Black diasporans speaking slick about Black America. That's something I've hated, right? Whenever you have some Black Americans who will say, "Why is it that many Black?" And guys, for me personally, I've never had a bad experience with Black America. I've always had good experiences, right? But one thing I know is that whenever you will have Black America who will say, well, why is it that you have so many Black immigrants who, I guess they will say, don't rock with Black America. I said, first of all, there are actually two reasons for this, right? One is that many of them, when they look at the media, when Africa and the Caribbean, the United States promotes like the worst picture of Black Americans, which is not a reflection of reality. When you actually come to a country, you meet the average Black, you realize that what's being put on TV is not true, right? That's the first part, the media promotion. But the second reason, because a lot of them, when they get here, they will face immense prejudice from Black Americans, whether as children or as adults. So if you're a young kid, Black African immigrant, whether you're from Africa or the Caribbean, you come to, the schools, you get made fun of for your accent. They call you African booty scratcher, all kind of jokes. And it's made with malicious intent, right? And if you're a Black immigrant who's an adult, right, you get made fun of for your accent too. So that's the second reason why. Right? And so what ends up happening is that these folks become resentful about the experience, and they just turn off, and then they start looking at Black Americans a kind of way, and then later on, Black Americans wonder why these folks are cold, right? But I will say, even with all of that happening, it was really only a certain percentage, right, of them even doing that. But now what we are seeing is that we're just seeing the bullying, the chastising, the African Buddhism, all these things now have just been amplified to, you got folks like Tariq talking about they not native. You got folks like Tariq talking about all this does is make it worse. Now, with all of that being said, right, the question then becomes, how do we move forward? Do I see a way forward? Personally, the only thing that gives me hope is that I understand that all of these things, number one, I understand that for a lot of Black Americans, they do have a culture of, joning on each other. So when when Black immigrants come and they call you all these other things, a lot of it is because of culture, right? So, I tell a lot of Black immigrants, do not take it so seriously. It's a cultural thing, right? But number two, I also recognize that a lot of this phenomenon I'm seeing online of this epidemic of Black Americans saying they're not African descent, claiming everything but African descent, right? Whether it's Cherokee, whether it's Native American, the Egyptian, the Moors, the Olmecs, right? All different things, right? I at least take peace in the fact, I at least, one thing that gives me peace about it is that at least I know that it's only online. It's only a small percentage, right? I know they don't represent a majority of Black Americans in the real world out here. So that at least gives me some peace out here, right? But it is concerning. It is concerning. One thing I will say before I kind of let the video go is I will at least try to make more videos more constantly, because I love making content. I've kind of got to try. My goal is trying to make more content, be more consistent. Really, if I can at least do one every day, that'll be really good. Something like this, that'd be really good too. So I'll try to see if I can achieve that. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But to kind of wrap it up, yeah, this epidemic's got to stop. Because what's happening is that all it's doing is, first, it's actually this epidemic of Black Americans saying they're not African descent. One, it's legitimizing the criticisms that non-Black people have had for very long. That the only reason Black Americans are out here claiming Egypt, claim Morocco, all these things, because they're not proud of their African lineage, right? But another thing it does, that it further alienates the Black diaspora and further reinforce many of these ideals that many Black Americans just don't want to be associated with the Black diaspora, or don't want to be associated with the Black African content, right? Not all, right? Once again, in fact, if I would actually say that this is actually a minority, I would say that the people who have this mentality are minority within the Black American community. But what I'm concerned about is that this is growing, and I'm seeing a growing of this happening, right? But nevertheless, y'all tell me in the chat what you guys think about this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? We can move on from there. But it's really concerning. It's crazy to me that in 2023, when you got migrants being put into Black American communities, when you got Asians suing against affirmative action, when you got whites talking about, y'all should be happy y'all were slaves, because if it wasn't for that, y'all would be in Africa somewhere with flies in your mouth. So y'all deserve reparation. It's funny how with all of these things happening, what Black Americans want to do now is say, we're not African, we're Olmecs, we're Egyptians, we're Moors, it's crazy. But anyway, guys, thank you guys for watching the video. Like, share, subscribe, hammer out.